Edgar Allan Poe's famous poem The Raven. So the summary is the unnamed narrator is wearily pursuing um, an old book one bleak December night. When he hears a tapping at the door to his room, he tells himself that it is merely a visitor and he awaits tomorrow because he cannot find release in his sorrow over the death of Lenore. So the rustling curtains frighten him, yeah, but he decides that it must be some late visitor, and going to the door, he asks for forgiveness from the visitor because he had been napping. However, when he opens the door, he sees and hears nothing except the word Lenore, an echo of his own words. Returning to his room, he again hears a tapping and reasons that it was probably the wind outside his window. When he opens the window, however, a raven enters and promptly preaches upon a blast of Pallas above his door. Its grave appearance amuses the narrator, who asks it for its names. The raven responds, "Nevermore." He does not understand the reply, but the raven says nothing else until the narrator predicts aloud that it will leave him tomorrow like the rest of his friends. Then the bird again says, "Nevermore." Startled, the narrator says that the raven must have learned his word from some unfortunate owner whose ill luck caused him to repeat the word frequently. Smiling, the narrator sits in front of the ominous raven to ponder about the meaning of its word. The raven continues to stare at him as the narrator sits in the chair that Lenore will never again occupy. He then feels that angels have approached and angrily calls the raven an evil prophet. He asks if there is a respite in Zealand and if he will again see Lenore in heaven, but the raven only responds, "Nevermore." In a fury, the narrator demands that the raven go back into the night and leave him alone again, but the raven says nevermore, and it does not leave the bust of Pallas. The narrator feels that his soul will never more leave the raven's shadow. The analysis of the poem is the Ravan is the most famous of Poe's poems, notable for its melodic and dramatic qualities. The meter of the poem is mostly uh, trochaic octameter with 8 untraced 2 syllable feet per lines combined with the predominating ABCBBB end rhyme scheme and the frequent use of internal rhyme, the trochaic octameter and the refrain of "nothing more and never more" give the poem a musical lilt when read aloud. Poe also emphasized the O sound in the words such as Lenore and Nevermore in order to underline the melancholy and lonely sounds of the poem and to establish the overall atmosphere. Finally, the repetition of Nevermore gives a circular sense of the poem and contributes to what Poe trimmed the unity of effect, where each word and line adds to the larger meaning of the poem. The unnamed narrator appears in a typically Gothic setting with a lonely apartment, a dying fire, and a bleak December night while wearily standing his books in an attempt to distract himself from his trouble. He thinks occasionally of Lenore, but he is generally able to control his emotion, although the effort he requires to do so tries him and makes his words equally slow and outwardly pacified. However, over the course of the narrative, the protagonist becomes more and more uh, agitated both in mind and in action, a progression that he demonstrates through his rationalizations and eventually through his increasingly exclamation read in a monologue. In every stanza near the end, however, his exclamations are punctuated by the claim desolation of this sentence. Quoth the Raven nevermore, reflecting the despair of his soul, like a number of poems such as uh, Eula Lumi and Annabelle Lee. The Raven refers to an agonized protagonist memories of a deceased woman. Through poetry, Lenore's premature death is implicitly made aesthetic, and the narrator is unable to free himself of his reliance upon her memory. He asks the raven if there is blame in Gilead, and therefore spiritual salvation, or if Lenore truly exists in the life after. But the raven confirms his worst suspicions by rejecting his supplications. The fear of death or the of oblivion informs much of Poe's writing, and The Raven is one of his bleakest publications because it provides such a definitely negative answer. By by contrast, when Poe used the name Lenore in a similar situation in the poem Lenore, the protagonist, Guy de Very, concludes that he need not cry in his mourning because he is confident that he will meet Lenore in heaven. Poe's choice of Raven as the bearer of ill news in is appropriate for a number of reasons. Originally, Poe sought only a dumb beast that was capable of producing human-like sounds without understanding the word's meaning, and he claimed that earlier conception of the Raven included the use of a parrot. In this sense, the Raven is important because it allows the narrator to be both the deliverer and interpreter of the sinister message without the existence of a blatantly supernatural intervention. At the same time, the Raven's black feather have traditionally been considered a magical sign of ill omen, and Poe may also be referring to Norse mythology, where the god Odin had two ravens named Hugin and Munin, which respectively meant thought and memory. The narrator is a student of the narrator is a student and thus follows Hugin, but Munin continuously interrupts his thoughts and in this case takes a physical form by landing on the bust of Pallas, which alludes to Athena, the Greek goddess of lightning. Due to the late honor of the poem sitting and to the narrator's mental uh, turmoil, the poem calls the narrator's reliability into question. At first, the narrator attempts to give his experiences a rational explanation, but by the end of the poem, he has cause to give the raven any interpretation beyond that which he invents in his own head. The Ravana has serves as a fragment of his soul and as an animal equivalent of Psyche in the poem. Uh, Ulalumi, poem Ulalumi. Each figure represents its respective character, subconscious that instinctively understands his needs to obsess and to mourn. As in Ulalumi, the protagonist is unable to avoid the recollection of his beloved, but whereas Psyche of Ulalumi sought to prevent the unearthing of painful memories, the Raven actively stimulates his thoughts of Lenore, and he effectively causes his own fate through the medium of a sentient animal. So that's all about the Ravana, which is a famous poem of Edgar Allan Poe.